Hello, everyone. I'm going to give us about 1 minute just to let the last few moms trickle in, and then we'll get started. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's great to have you all. Welcome to our training on getting things going at home. My name is Victoria Tippins, and I've been attending births for 15 years as a doula and more recently a student midwife. I induced all three of my babies at home. And so I have a lot of experience with this. And, I also just do want to say that your body knows what to do and your body knows how to go into labor and your baby knows what to do. And normal spontaneous labor is like going into labor spontaneously typically is a little bit easier. And there are absolutely like very valid reasons why someone would want to have an induction of labor, why they'd want to try to get things going at home. With me, with all three of my births, there was a completely different reason. With my first, I was almost 42 weeks and felt like 42 weeks was kind of as far as I felt comfortable being pregnant. And so I wanted to try to get things going. With my second, I had a really, really long early labor. I woke up at like 1 a.m. with contractions. And then by 6 p.m. that evening was when I went into labor. So it was very long. And I was feeling really exhausted and things kind of weren't continuing to pick up. Oh, and I'll say if you don't mind to muting yourself so there isn't any background noise, that would be great. You can just like click on the screen at the bottom. There should be a little mute button. Um, and let's see. Yeah, and so I just was like, I want to try to get things going so I'm not like going to sleep and continuing on this like forever early labor journey. And with my third, my water broke before going into labor. I waited a certain amount of time that I felt comfortable waiting, and then I chose to do some things to get labor going. I used different tools with each one all the time, every time it worked. And every time there was a reason. Honestly, I kind of looking back, I wish that I could have experienced spontaneous labor, but I feel like my births were perfect too. A trap that sometimes we can fall into is that we can get a little bit excited, a little bit impatient, and feel like a lot of pressure around like all the different like reasons why we want to have our baby now. There could be like logistical pressure, pressure with like work and time off, and like all this stuff can come up. And all of that is valid. But I also want to like offer a little bit of just really an invitation for you to really get clear within yourself on what it is that you are wanting for your birth and what really feels right for you. Because when we make choices, an induction is a very big choice to start your labor. It's a very big choice. When we make those choices from impatience or from fear, um, or like lack of clarity, maybe around our options, that can sometimes lead us down a path we really don't want to go down. And so just having tools to make those choices from a really clear place is huge. So that's kind of like a quick little overview. Today, we are going to cover what induction is, what your induction options are, what are evidence-based reasons to induce and what are not, and give you some tools for decision making to help you feel really confident in your choices. I'm going to kind of go over some of that stuff, decision making first and induction. At the end, we're going to talk about like exactly how you do it because I have a formula that I will share, and I'll cover like the risks and benefits of all of that too. So it's a very like personal thing. And this kind of choice is best made when we really understand what all of our options are. And we also have ongoing support to help us in just making sure that there isn't any sneaky fear coming up when we're making that choice, and we can create a plan that's really personalized. So what I'm going to share with you today is like very like general. In general, these things can work. But for each person, like in my coaching program, if someone wanted to go into labor early for some reason, we create a personal plan that's around them and their preferences and their situation. And I will say that emotional preparation is a really huge piece when it comes to preparing to go into labor or trying to go into labor. Because if you do all the right things, but you have a lot of emotional stuff coming up, it'll be really hard for you to go into labor. And that's why in my coaching program, I really like to support moms in working through all of those things and having that ongoing support with that so that when it's time for them to go into labor, they have those tools and they've built relationships with their fear. So sneaky fear isn't coming up and kind of keeping their labor from happening. If you are interested in joining my coaching program, if you want to talk to me more about your birth and what you want, just DM me and we'll book a free birth breakthrough session and we'll talk about it. Okay, so first I want to start talking about the reasons why someone might want to induce. So there are medical reasons to induce, and this is called a medical induction, and then, or a medically indicated induction. And then there are elective inductions, which means that we're choosing to do an induction even though it isn't medically necessary. Both are valid, totally valid. And what's really important is that we're making choices from a place of love rather than making choices from fear. So the quick tool that I'm going to offer for this before we move on to the rest of the induction material is knowledge, wisdom, and love. I love this tool. So that means that we're first looking at the knowledge piece, which is what does the evidence have to say on my options? Is it safe for me to use castor oil or to do a membrane sweep? What are the risks? What are the benefits? And really understanding that. And that's really important. So when we understand what the evidence has to say, then we can make an informed and evidence-based choice. There is something called the evidence practice gap, which means that it takes sometimes 10 or 20 years or more for current research and evidence to make its way into policy. And that's just because there is a hierarchy in many hospitals where the policymakers have to consider profit and liability and convenience when they are making these policies. And this is well researched that profit does impact policy. Also culturally, like with colleagues, it can just take a while for a culture of medical practice to shift and to start approaching things differently after new research and evidence comes out. So when it comes to induction, sometimes we feel like we're being told that we need to do a certain thing because it is like what the provider is used to, even though new evidence is saying maybe that isn't the best thing. So anyway, if with the knowledge piece specifically, I think it can be really helpful to look for evidence-based resources externally, like in addition to what your provider has to say, because we definitely want to take that into consideration, but also looking at sources like evidence-based birth, my free birth course. I source my information from evidence-based birth. Information that is evidence-based is really, really helpful to have. The next piece is intuition. So we just want to check in with how we're feeling. If you're feeling like, I'm not sure if I'm feeling anxiety or if it's my intuition, it's really helpful to explore that and have tools to explore that. And if you have been building relationships with your fear, you may be able to catch what I'm like, this anxiety that I'm feeling right now is actually this part of me that really wants to control things. And I've been aware of her and I've been working with her, with support with Victoria. And that's what's coming up for me right now. And I have tools to address that in the moment. And after I've felt my fear and processed it, then I can go back to checking in with my intuition. Intuition is a feeling of emotion, usually felt in the body, that is your inner wisdom. It's you guiding yourself around what is the best thing for you to do. And it's really important that we pay attention to how we're feeling and we honor how we're feeling. If we're feeling anxiety, maybe that's not the best choice for us. Or maybe we need to process and feel some of that anxiety that's coming up and build a relationship with that part of ourselves to help to clear it, so that we can go back to really feeling into our intuition. You can use your body as a compass. So in the presence of this bottle of castor oil in my hand that I'm considering taking, how do I feel? Do I feel like my belly hurts and my chest feels tight and my throat feels tight and I'm like, I don't want to do this thing? Or are you feeling like, I feel really relaxed? Like in the presence of this choice, I feel relaxed. That is a really good way to tell if it's a good choice for you or not. So we're looking at the knowledge, we're looking at our intuition, and then I invite you to deliberately feel love in your body for your baby before you make the choice. And this is such an important step to take. Because if we like feel like, okay, intuitively I feel pretty good about this, I understand the risks and benefits, I feel good about that, but I still have this little sneaky fear that's coming up. Sometimes like the fear can creep in without us really being aware of that. Choosing to just feel love for your baby before we make any big choices is a really great practice, because that can just help make sure that you're 100% like, yes, check the box, I feel really good about this choice. So just choose to like connect with your baby and take a few deep breaths and go, I love you, baby. And like feel your heart, and feel that love for your baby and feel that relaxation, and then move forward with your choice. If you're trying to feel love for your baby and you're like, there's still something there that doesn't really feel right, do not ignore that. We want to pay attention to that. I want to share that induction has become, like, again, getting things going at home, really, really common, and something that all moms feel like they have to do. And there really is a balance with like societal pressure, like looking at that and it's like, is that the reason why? And also looking at our intuition. So I had a mom, like I'm always learning as a coach, and I had a mom in my coaching program who would bring up repeatedly, like, I think that I'm just thinking about doing some things to get labor going at home. And I would kind of just try to reassure her, like, oh, you don't have to do that, like your body knows what to do, like you're healthy and your baby's healthy. And then later I kind of like, actually just the other day I was thinking, like, I wonder if that was her intuition, like telling her, because at first I thought that maybe she just had a lot of attention on induction and that she had some fear around it. But now I'm wondering, like, maybe that was her intuition telling her that she needed to do that. And I'm not the one to be able to identify that for you, but I can give you tools to help you identify that for yourself. And it's really, really, it's just life changing to have tools to help you identify, is this my intuition telling me that I need to do this thing? Or am I just operating from a place of fear? And that will really, really like make the difference, make between your birth going this way or that way. I also wanted to say that, like, kind of going back on how it's really common to feel like you have to like do a bunch of stuff at the end of pregnancy. I do want to say that you don't have to. And before, like, I don't want this training to be like, use my formula to go into labor, because what I really want you to take away from this is an invitation for you to listen to your own intuition and make informed choices in alignment with your values around whatever feels best for you, really understanding and believing that most of the time your body will go into labor at the perfect time. And yes, there are reasons to go into labor, to try to get your body to go into labor, medical and otherwise, that are all valid, absolutely. But what's so important is that we're not making choices from fear, that we're choosing deliberately from a place of love for our baby, and that we understand, like, we're informed around our choices. Okay, so I wanted to share one more story about like choosing from fear, and then we're going to go in more into induction material. So one of my coaching clients came to me one time and she was like, I think that I'm going to do just like a routine 39-week induction. Some providers just routinely recommend induction at 39 weeks. This is an elective induction. It's not medically indicated. And research has found that doing a 39-week routine induction does not improve outcomes for mothers and babies. It doesn't have any impact really on your cesarean risk. There was a study that came out called the Arrive trial that is poor quality. And maybe not, I wouldn't say poor quality, but like, how would I describe it? Like, providers weren't blinded, and it happened during a time where there was a huge cultural movement in the medical community to try to push 39-week induction. So it was possible that providers might have done whatever they could to prevent cesareans in the induction group. Anyway, it's a whole thing. If you're curious, you can look that up with evidence-based birth. They have a lot of really great information on it. But we have some studies that show that inductions make your C-section rate go up, and some studies that show that inductions make your C-section rate or risk go down. So overall, we found that inductions do not really impact cesarean risk. So in general, there isn't really a lot of evidence at all to show that a 39-week routine induction benefits the population in general. It's kind of more about like a case-by-case basis, choosing if you want to do that or not for you. So anyway, she was like, I think I want to do a 39-week induction. I was like, okay, why do you want to do that? And she was like, well, because I'm just afraid of giving birth in the car. And I really don't want to give birth in the car. And if I get to the hospital first, I won't have to like worry about my fear. So that's someone choosing from fear. And I was like, okay, let's unpack that. So we were unpacking. And this is why coaching can be so helpful, because you get that personalized support. And she would have just like done that 39-week routine injection, on her own, like without having someone who can kind of like reflect to her, I think you're choosing from fear, and we can unpack. And when we got to the bottom of it, we realized that actually she's afraid of pain. And she was so afraid of pain that she was trying to control her birth, and controlling her birth was being expressed as doing a routine 39-week injection. And then we realized, like, oh, if it's just pain that I'm afraid of, that's something that I can address. I can work with that fear. I can build a relationship with it. I can learn tools to help reduce pain during labor or prevent it altogether or help me cope with labor. And that helped clear the fear. So she felt so much more confident going into birth, and her birth was just like completely different because of that realization. So that's just an example of like making that choice from fear. I'll give one more example. Maybe someone, I make myself available to my students so they can reach out to me if needed. And one of my moms, her water broke, and she waited a little bit and she didn't go into labor. And so she was like, I think I want to do castor oil. I want to do something to try to get my body into labor. And I was like, but she was actually saying, I don't know, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Like, she was really in and out. And I was like, okay, let's like feel into that. Like, go do the knowledge, wisdom, and love tool. Like, look at what you know, check in with how you feel. She came back to me and she was like, this, I got clear with myself, and this voice I kept hearing, and it was like, I just will do anything to avoid Pitocin. Anything to avoid Pitocin. I'm so afraid of Pitocin. So that's another choice from fear. We're choosing to do castor oil, not because the mom felt like this is the right choice for me, but because she was so afraid of Pitocin. And so, if she had taken the castor oil, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe it would have been fine, but it wouldn't have been a really confident choice that she felt empowered in. And that really makes a difference around how we feel about our birth and how births unfold. So, um, okay, so next I want to talk about, let's talk about all the different reasons why someone might want to get things going at home. So number one is if your water breaks before going into labor. It happens about 10% of the time. So we all see the movies where like the water breaks first. And I just watched a show like the other day, and her water broke first. I can't wait for TV to start getting a little more realistic, because like that can happen, but it's rarely is this like pop and a gush, an explosion of water in a public place, right? Usually you'll just have like a little bit of a trickle. You'll notice like a continuous little trickle, or there might be kind of flows of some gushes. Rarely a gallon of water will just like spill out between your legs randomly in the middle of nowhere, or like not at your home, like in a public place. I guess that can happen, but it's pretty rare. So if your water breaks before you go into labor, there is a policy in many hospitals that says that they want you to be in labor by 24 hours. And the reason why that policy is there is because they're worried about infection risk. So when the water bag is broken, there is a possibility for bacteria to travel upwards and to, cause an infection in the baby. So in the 1950s, providers weren't washing their hands in between caring for laboring moms. And so they were spreading all kinds of bacteria to different mamas and different babies. And they are finding that babies had really bad outcomes if their water had been broken for 24 hours. So that's where the 24-hour rule comes from. It comes from the 1950s, and it does not apply to today, because today we use sterile gloves if someone has an open bag of water. We wash our hands, right? And so the new research and evidence says that if you wait 48 to 72 hours before going into labor, that does not increase the risk of infection for your baby. There is a slight increased risk in a uterine infection for you, and I can't remember exactly at what point that becomes present. But yeah, I think it's really helpful to know that. And that is if you don't have like an STI, if you don't have GBS. GBS is a bacteria that can live in the vaginal canal. Some moms have it, some moms don't. It can kind of appear and go away. Typically, we are tested for it around 36 weeks. If you do have GBS, then the research and evidence shows that going into labor within 18 hours is optimal. So with GBS, 18 hours, we want to hopefully have you be going into labor. Without GBS, the research and evidence says 48 to 72 hours. Your provider might have a different opinion, and that's okay. I think it's just good to let them know your water's broken and to share with them what your preferences are and have a conversation and be collaborative. If they say, we have to have you come in immediately and start Pitocin. That is an evidence-based choice, and it's totally okay to do that. And if your provider has like checked all the things and made sure your baby's moving well, there's no smell in the fluid, right? That their color is clear and things like that, and they confirm that you're healthy and your baby is okay. Some moms do choose to wait a little bit longer and try to go into labor spontaneously. And if you wanted to do that, or try to get things going at home too, you could just have a conversation with your provider and say, I'd really like to wait for spontaneous labor. How about we check back in 24 hours or something like that? With a midwife in a birth center or out of hospital, it's a little different. Like if your doctor is like, I really don't support you being pregnant beyond 24 hours, like I want you to like be trying to go into labor. I don't support you going into labor spontaneously. And they're really upset about that. I'm not saying to decline what your provider is wanting you to do. I'm just trying to illustrate what the research has to say so you can make an informed choice. And if you do want to make an informed choice, knowing you don't have GBS and knowing that 85% of moms go into labor spontaneously in 24 hours and you want to give yourself that chance, it's okay to decline and to choose to make that choice if that is what feels right for you. So I just want to be clear, I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just illustrating that that is an option that some people choose. And it's up to you what you want to do. If you, let's see, if you have a midwife though, midwives can say like, this is what that I'm comfortable with because they're assessing you for an out of hospital birth, which is a little different. And some midwives are fine with 72 hours. Some midwives prefer 24 or 36. And it's just up to that midwife and how they practice. And so it's really, really important if your water breaks to ask what the timeline is immediately so you aren't like caught off guard around anything. So the options are if your water breaks before labor, you can go in and get Pitocin and just try to do a medical induction and go into labor. You could wait for spontaneous labor for however long you feel comfortable waiting, or you could try to get things going at home. And it's up to you. The general advice that I see in the midwives in my community who are supporting moms who are low risk having out of hospital births that are like if their water breaks is to first like get some rest and hydrate and take care of your body. So you want to eat good food, you want to hydrate, you want to rest and make sure that especially before you try to get things going, that all your needs are taken care of. That's really important. If it's 2 a.m, like just go back to bed. Like you don't have to get up and try to do things. We want you to sleep. If it's been like, maybe I'll use this example. I just went to a birth a few days ago. The mom's water broke at 7 a.m. So I get to her house around 7 p.m. So it's been broken for 12 hours. And we're like, do we try to get things going or do we let you sleep? The answer is almost always for you to sleep. If there was a 24-hour policy that she had to follow, or she was choosing to follow a 24-hour rule, then maybe trying to do something would be better if there was like a cutoff. But her midwife gave her 36 hours. So she said, okay, I'm going to get a good night's sleep. I'm going to wake up in the morning and start trying to get things going at home in the morning. And I'll have a whole nother 12 hours. I'll have the whole day. And she did it. And she had a 2-hour birth at home and it was amazing. And I'm still glowing from it. It was super beautiful. So you just want to make sure that you get good rest if your water breaks and you are feeling like you want to try to get things going. So that's your water broken. The next one would be like if your labor is really, really long and early labor. So I talked about this with my second. I had a really long early labor. It just seemed to not really kick over. And it probably was because I was like having some emotional stuff and I was feeling a little stressed, like when am I going to go into labor? And I wonder if maybe that is one of the reasons why my body just like didn't send me into labor. But I ended up going and getting some acupuncture and I went into full active labor on my acupuncturist table, like full blown active labor. And I had a 2-hour birth after that. Some moms have a really long early labor and then like a 2-hour active labor. And I think that's just what my body was doing. But I got to the point where I was so emotionally exhausted and I was up for most of the night with contractions. And I was like, I really don't want to have a whole nother night like this. I want to try to do something to push it over the edge. So I went and got acupuncture and that was what did it for me. Another reason is if you're just struggling emotionally with being pregnant still, and that's totally valid. If you're just like, I really am struggling with my mental health, I feel anxious, having a hard time, and I just like really need this baby to come, and another one would be to avoid medical induction. So sometimes moms start to have high blood pressure and the provider's like, it's still okay, but if it gets to this point, like we're really going to want to encourage you to do a medical induction, in that case, it might be a good choice for you to consider doing some things at home if you're really wanting to avoid medical induction. We're not going to cover medical induction today, but I do have another training in the live trainings folder in the classroom tab, so you can go watch that if you want to learn more about what that looks like. If you're wanting to avoid a medical induction because we're starting to creep towards a medical issue, that is another reason. So yeah, those are some common reasons why moms might want to try to get things going at home. But just getting things going at home routinely, just because you're 40 weeks and we should get things going, I highly recommend you don't, because getting things going or really, inducing your labor comes with risks. And sometimes the benefits of inducing outweigh the risks of continuing to be pregnant, right? And that's the better choice for you, in which case, definitely we want to make that choice. I should put my phone on do not disturb. But you don't have to routinely try to get things going. Your body knows what to do and your baby knows what to do. And most of the time, your baby will come at the perfect time, when everything is ready. If we try to, well, maybe I'll say this, a lot of things have to line up for an induction to work well and for you to be able to go into labor. And so, if you were to try to get a bunch of contractions to happen, like you're pumping, maybe you take castor oil, but no one has assessed where your baby is in your pelvis. Maybe your baby's kind of up high. Maybe they're not well applied to the cervix. What's going to happen is you're going to start getting a lot of contractions, and it's not going to create a lot of cervical changes, and it might not lead to a lot of progress because you get contractions, but we need more than just contractions to be able to have our baby. We need the baby to be well applied to the cervix, so that the cervix can start to make changes. So if your baby were to enter your pelvis and they're in a position, usually they enter on the side, then maybe they're facing a little forward, which is a variation of normal, but sometimes can be not the most optimal position for some people. If your baby were to be kind of facing forward, and maybe they're really favoring one side of your pelvis because there's all this tension on the other side, what can happen is your baby's chilling on your cervix like this. So they're not really putting good, even adequate pressure around the whole inside of the cervix. We want your baby to be like that. We want your baby to put good, even adequate pressure. So when you get contractions pushing the baby down, the baby's pushing on the cervix and they're well applied. And it's that pressure from the baby that's on your cervix that stimulates the release of more oxytocin, more contractions. That's what helps you have a steady, consistent contraction pattern. That's what helps your cervix to soften and also what helps it to open. So we want to be looking at that too. If you are going to consider doing something at home, that's one of the reasons why doing a cervical exam, I think, can be helpful. And I'm all for just not doing any exams at all. If you don't want one, you don't need a cervical exam unless it gives you meaningful information to change the course of action. That's when we want to do a cervical exam. You can get them routinely if you want, but there isn't any research that supports that routine cervical exams in pregnancy and in labor improve outcomes for mothers and babies. It's not needed to assess safety. It's just used to assess progress, but we can't adequately assess progress with a cervical exam, and we cannot identify when you're going to labor from a cervical exam. I was checked and my cervix was long. It's as long as your thumb. It was long. It was closed the day before, and I went into labor the next day with my first. I checked someone as a student midwife years ago. She was 5 centimeters in pregnancy. She was 5 centimeters and she wasn't in labor. And she had her baby the next day, which was really cool. So it does not mean anything. And I think that's really helpful to know. But if you're like, I think I want to get things going at home, what's my cervix doing? I think that can be helpful. It's not necessary, but I think it can be helpful to kind of help you make that decision or decide what it is that you need to do. So if you find out that your baby is nice and low, they're well applied to the cervix, that's what you want to ask, what my baby's position is. Are they well applied to the cervix? If they're nice and low, station is how sometimes they'll measure it. Like if the baby's up high, it's +3. If they're about to come out, or -3. This is -3. If they're about to come out, it's +3. So maybe they're a 0 station or a -1 station, which is very low. They're well applied to the cervix. They're in a good position, which means they are, probably facing that way or facing the side. This is called LOT. You don't have to remember this, but I'll just tell you in case you hear it. Left occiput transverse, or right ROT, right occiput transverse. They also might be like LOA, so they're facing back, anterior, or ROA. Those are all really great positions. If the baby is a little OP or posterior, just means the baby's facing forward a little bit. Sometimes that's fine. Sometimes that's what your baby wants to do. But I would double down on doing the spinning babies positions. And if you're coaching in my coaching program, you have learned these. I'm not sure if I think my spinning babies lesson is free. It's in the free birth course, so you can look at it there. And if it's not, I'll go make sure it is, but I'm pretty sure it is. I would do the spinning babies and I would double down on them to really encourage baby to rotate into more of an anterior position. And at one point, it's also, we kind of have to let go of control, just trust the baby knows how to get through the pelvis. And sometimes babies want to come out this way. My mom, who had a 2-hour birth the other day, her baby came out facing forward, and that's how the baby was. So, sometimes that's how babies are. But in general, it's better to encourage baby to be facing back. So knowing that's helpful. So if someone says your cervix is opening a little bit, it's like softening a little bit. The babies will apply to the cervix. They're nice and low. They're like a -1 or 0 station. That's very low. It's like, okay, that says to me that my baby's in a good position. If I try to do some things at home, it's more likely that they'll work, and it's safe to do some contraction things just right away. If someone says your baby's up high, they're not well applied to your cervix, and maybe also they're facing forward a little bit, then I might say, okay, before I do anything to try to get contractions to start at home, I just really need to focus on helping my baby be in a good position. That's like the number one most important thing. So maybe we're just going to spend the day doing all those things. And then maybe I'll go back in and get another check, or maybe after I do the things, I'll feel comfortable trying to do contraction stuff. And the things to help your baby get into a good position are the spinning babies. So go check out that lesson. The Miles circuit. And I would say with the Miles circuit, it's a series of positions you do to help your baby be in a good position to support labor and starting. The curb walking, don't do that by yourself. I know someone who broke her ankle doing curb walking. So please don't do that by yourself. Instead, hold someone's hand and have a spotter when you do that, because you really don't want to hurt yourself. And your center of gravity is a little off when you have a big belly in front of you. So, and then the other one would be, there's two more. One, do not recline anymore. Don't recline. Please don't recline. We want to, when we recline, we really encourage the baby to face forward in the way that the pelvis is. When you're leaning back, like sitting up like this is fine. But if you wanted to lean back more, what that does is it, like, as the baby's trying to engage, it pushes the baby into this forward facing position. But when you are having your pelvis, it's hard to hold the pelvis in the baby. If you have your pelvis like this and hands and knees, that leaning forward position actually encourages your baby to get in an anterior position, which is a more ideal position for most people and most pelvises. So we want to do spinning babies, Miles circuit, don't recline, and spend some time in hands and knees. I recommend you go to the pool. If someone were to tell me, like, if I for some reason was like, tomorrow I'm trying to get labor going, and someone were to be like, your baby is not well applied to the cervix, they're high up and they're kind of facing forward, I would jump to the pool unless my water's broken. But if my water's not broken, I would go to the pool and I would kick on a kickboard, float around on my belly for like 20 minutes at least. Spend some time floating on your belly if you can. If you can't access a pool, just get in hands and knees and spend some time in hands and knees. You can. I have a hot tub with my last birth, which was really cool. I didn't birth in there, but like that's not safe. But I spent time in pregnancy without my water being broken, just floating on my belly. That was really helpful. You could just get your birth ball and you can like lean on it facing forward and watch a movie. Spend a little time in hands and knees. Hands and knees is going to really help. So that's what I would do first. If your baby is already in a good position, do those things anyway, but you don't have to wait to do the contraction stuff. You could start like doing the things to encourage contractions if your baby's already in a good position. But we also want to still just encourage the position to continue to be good. And we want to continue to relieve tension in the pelvis, just supporting the baby and doing what they need to do. So yeah, let's see. So maybe I'm going to transition into how to prep to get things going at home and then how to get things going at home. But I first just wanted to cover like a few different reasons that are evidence-based for baby to be induced, and some reasons that are not. And because these are just like really common ones that comes up. So I just want to cover this really quick. Number one is a big baby. So if someone does an ultrasound with you at the end of pregnancy and they tell you that your baby is big, so this is the non-medically indicated third trimester growth ultrasound. It's usually done around 32 weeks. Declining that ultrasound is actually an evidence-based way to reduce your risk for a C-section. I'm not telling you to decline the ultrasound. I'm just giving you that information. I got that from evidence-based birth. If they find out that your baby's big and they think your baby is big and they want to induce you, it's possible that they are inducing a baby that is average size because those ultrasounds are accurate about 50% of the time. And I know quite a few moms who had an induction of labor because they were like, your baby's in the 99th percentile, they're huge. And then the baby was 7.5 pounds. And that does happen. And so it's okay to get an induction if you think your baby's big, but just know that that's not evidence-based. ACOG does not recognize a big baby as medical indication for induction. So I just wanted to share that. The other one is past 40 weeks. You're 40 weeks. Now it's time to get your labor going. Now we need to do an induction. This is where things can sometimes go sideways because moms are like really vulnerable and they're exhausted from being pregnant, and it's exciting thinking that your baby could come soon, but inductions, do come with risks at home or doing it, in the hospital. And it's normal to be 40 weeks pregnant. It's normal to be 41 weeks pregnant and even 42. The research and evidence we have shows that after 42, it starts to really not become safe anymore. And that's why most midwives have a cutoff around 42. If you have any concern about staying pregnant longer, but you want to stay pregnant longer, like maybe your provider's like really pushing an induction, because some providers are just induction heavy and other ones are not. Every provider, every model of care will give you a different answer. But if you're like, maybe you're 41 weeks and they're like, you're 41, like we need to get things going. I don't allow my moms to go past 41. Other providers allow their moms to go past 41 as long as they remain safe to do so. Well, you could say if you want to stay pregnant, I'm not telling you to decline an induction. I'm just saying if you want to stay pregnant and you want to make that choice to be pregnant for a few more days or a little closer to 42 weeks, you can just do an NST. It's a non-stress test, and a BPP, which is a biophysical profile. You can go in every day or every other day. I believe if your baby passes those tests, the risk for stillbirth is practically none. It's like extremely low, but I don't remember the data on that. Birthing Instincts did a great podcast on this topic. I can't remember like exactly what they said, but you could look up Birthing Instincts NST, and that will give you the like access to that podcast. You could find it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So they'll cover that. But basically, like you could do an NST, and the NST is where they put you on the straps, where the baby's heart rate is being monitored for a little bit. And they'll do it for about 20 minutes, and it's just going to monitor how well the baby is doing. It helps to identify if the baby has good variability in their heart rate and they're getting well oxygenated and the placenta is working well. And so you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but if you have concern at any point about your baby, I definitely go get one. Or if you're wanting to stay pregnant longer and your provider is like wanting to be more strict and wanting to induce, you could make a compromise and say like, what if I come in every day or every other day? Would that be okay? And I'll do the NST and VPP. And as long as the baby remains good, like I want to keep waiting for spontaneous labor. And that's okay too if you want to do that. So anyway, just like being past 40 weeks doesn't mean you have to get an induction. And everyone is a little bit different on that. And the last one is immediately when you have a spontaneous rupture, you have to go in immediately and start doing things. And we've talked about that already a little bit before. So, okay. Let's transition to preparation. So if you are thinking you want to get things going at home, what I would do first is prepare. So maybe you want to do it tonight, in which case you don't have a lot of time, right? But if you're thinking like I'm 40 weeks, and maybe I'll give you an example. One of my moms, actually, she had a 38-week cutoff with her provider that was medically indicated because she had a fall and it had like a little tiny placental abruption. They didn't want her to go past 38 weeks of pregnancy. and she really didn't want to get a Pitocin induction or a medical induction. She wanted her birth to be as natural as possible, and just herself personally wanted to avoid the risks that come with medications. So we spent the many weeks we had like 3 or 4 weeks doing all this preparation work to support her body and hopefully going into labor spontaneously early. If not, just using some gentle induction tools and for those tools to be more effective. And it worked. And she had the most amazing birth ever. It was awesome. Um, and so doing the, what did I write down? I can't even read my old handwriting. So doing the spinning baby, acupuncture. I wrote ACU and I thought I would understand what that meant, but clearly I don't. Acupuncture is one. So if you find an acupuncturist that works with pregnant people, and you would want to find one that can work with you around 36 weeks in the birth window. You can work with an acupuncturist beforehand, but they shouldn't do the points to stimulate labor until you're in the window where it's safe to do so, which might not be until 36, 37 weeks. You can also ask your provider, when can I start doing the acupuncture for that? There are points that can support drawing the energy down and can support making your cervix make some changes. And I believe in it because I went into full active labor on the table, and I know a lot of moms who went into labor right after seeing the acupuncturist. So you can do the acupuncture. It's more gentle. Like it's probably not going to, it won't send you into labor if your body's not ready. It's not like you take a medication that will force you to have contractions. But if you're right on the edge, it can help. And it can also help prime your body so that getting things going at home later, if you're planning to do that, could potentially be more effective. So going to acupuncture regularly. Or if you're at the end of your pregnancy and you want to try to get things going in the next few days, see if you can get in with someone. Do the spinning babies every day and do not skip this. It's so important. Your baby being in a good position for birth is so important. The next one is eating dates. I think it's 6 dates a day you can start at 34 weeks. And eating dates we found is an evidence-based way to support your cervix in having more dilation when you arrive to the hospital, if you're on admission to care, wherever you're giving birth, and also dilating a little faster. So eating dates is great. Going to the pool and floating on your belly, and no reclining. So those are, in general, the things that I would encourage you to do. Everyone, I give them like a more personal plan because everyone is different and has a different situation. And maybe baby is really favoring one side, in which case we're wanting to incorporate different positions to help baby move. So, it's very personal. But in general, that's like what I would have someone start with. Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk about actually getting things going at home. So if you are feeling like, okay, today's the day I want to get my labor going, what is going to be the most effective is to combine tools. So the tools that you can use out of hospital are mechanical tools and natural tools. In the hospital, then there's medical tools. And those are the 3 different ways that we can support our body in going into labor. You can always combine the tools. If you're at the hospital and you need an induction, you can still use natural and mechanical tools if you want to. But we can't use medical tools out of the hospital, right? So I think that it's most helpful if you are okay with the cervical exam, if you need to go into labor, if there's like a reason, like I don't know, not with, sorry, my words, I need to eat dinner soon. So I'm starting to like get low protein. I'm not speaking as well. If you are feeling like you really just need to go into labor for whatever reason, and you want to do the best that you can, like you want to do everything that you can combine a mechanical tool, which would be a membrane sweep or a Foley balloon or Dilapan S with your natural tools, but you don't have to either. I'll just quickly cover mechanical tools. That would be, so a membrane sweep is when a provider would take a finger. They insert 2 fingers, and usually they would use one to kind of hold your cervix in place, and the other would go through and they sweep. And one of my mamas, I see that you're here today, told me that her provider said like it didn't work if you don't cry or something like that. And I don't believe that. Like they don't have to be really, really uncomfortable. I was trained to do them like around like this. And I think that's a lot more uncomfortable for people. I got a sweep with my second. It didn't send me into labor. I stayed pregnant for a couple weeks after that, but she just did this really gently, and I barely felt anything. It was like a lot better. So everyone will perform a sweep differently. You don't have to cry for it to be effective. It can be effective when it's gentle like this. But I think it's good to kind of talk to your provider about like what to expect and what the risks are. The risks to sweeping is that it does come with an increased risk for breaking your water. And it's ideal to not break your water before going into labor, because if you do, it opens up that clock, right? And the risk for infection. And so it's just like preferable to avoid automatically breaking it. If it breaks spontaneously, it meant that your body was ready to do that. And that's what was, part of your normal physiology. But us breaking it ourselves is intervening. And generally, normal physiology works really, really, really well. And when we intervene, sometimes it's fine, but other times things can kind of like snowball. And that risk becomes present for things to go in a direction we don't want when we intervene. So that's something to be aware of. Anytime anything goes above your cervix, the risk for breaking your water can become present. And that's really the main risk with mechanical tools. The other risks would be that they could be a little uncomfortable. Or like maybe when you're in labor, your cervix will like move down, it'll open up and be softer. At the end of pregnancy, it's typically a little farther back and harder to reach. And so if it's really uncomfortable and hard to access your cervix, you might not want to get a cervical exam when you're in labor, even though in labor it might be a little bit easier to do and less uncomfortable. So that's just like kind of helpful to be aware of. Like we don't want you to be experiencing any discomfort that will kind of shake your confidence or make you feel like you don't want something in labor that actually maybe would be a good option for you. So yeah. Okay. So Foley balloon is the other one. And that's a little balloon. They can put it inside your cervix. There's a tube that it comes out and is taped to your leg. It's a little annoying. And it can stay in your cervix for many hours. It slowly opens and fills. It expands with saline. It fills and it expands your cervix, typically to about 4 centimeters, and then it will fall out. It's 70% effective. So that's one that you can try too. And the other one is called Dilapan S. It's not very common. It is little rods that they put in your cervix. They swell with cervical fluid and then they can be removed, and they make your cervix kind of open. And the Foley balloon is one that's like more common in the cervical sweep. So those things are options. You don't have to do any of them if you don't want to, though it's completely optional. If you don't want to do any of those, then you can just focus on the natural. Or if you want to like give it your all, you can choose one of those and then also combine it with natural tools. The nice thing about the Foley balloon and Dilapan S is that if at any point you're like, I don't like this, you can take it out. And they're usually outpatient, so you don't have to like be admitted to the hospital to like, have them. You can go home. So okay, let's move on to like what to do when you're at home. So I just want to make it clear, I'm not telling you do these things. I'm just like illustrating what people often do and what I found to combine has worked well for many moms. So first, we're making sure the baby's in a good position and we're focusing on that, right? I would make sure you get a good night's rest and you have food in your system and you drink water before we begin. So usually doing things at home would be like we are waiting till the morning. If you're starting to have contractions at nighttime, don't stay up trying to keep them going. Don't stay up and do the pumping and like do all the things I'm about to teach you. Instead, go to sleep. And if they fizzle out in the night, they fizzle out in the night. And maybe it'll start again the next day, or you can do things the next day if you choose to. But we really want to ensure that you're not going to go into a long early labor phase that is created by you doing all these things to get your contractions to happen through the night. And then in the morning, you're going to be exhausted when active labor actually starts. We want to try to give you as much sleep as possible before going into labor. So get a good night's rest. If you wake up and you're like, I had the worst night of sleep ever, and I still want to try to get labor going, it depends on what your timeline is, if there is a timeline, but like maybe do therapeutic rest, which means that you take Benadryl, take melatonin, take magnesium, talk to your provider about what to take, and then take that thing and try to take a nap. That's really important to do too. We just want to like make sure that you're well rested before we do any of this stuff. So once you're well rested, I would start in the morning because combining natural tools can sometimes take many hours. Sometimes it can take all day. And you want to make it like your labor induction day. Some moms are like, yeah, I'm trying to get labor going. I'm just doing a little bit of pumping. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. That might send you into labor, but probably not. And that's fine if you don't really care if you go into labor or not. But if you were like, I really, for this reason, need to go into labor like soon, we want to just do our best to combine all the tools and just really give it a go. So that would mean like we get up in the morning, we take care of our needs, and then we're going to start with spinning babies. We're going to do a set of spinning babies and do the mile circuit. So and that would take about an hour and a half. That's how long the mile circuit is. So we're just starting off with supporting your baby and being in a good position. And then if you want, after that, you could take castor oil. Castor oil is something that, as out of all the natural tools, is the least gentle, but it's also the most effective. Like, it is very effective at sending you into labor. It doesn't always send you into labor, but it definitely can. And I used it for 2 of my labors. It does come with a few risks that are not very common, but they're possible. So let's talk about those. Number 1 is that you could throw up, you could have diarrhea. And usually the throwing up happens if you don't take it with the right things. If you take it on its own, you're going to throw it up. If you take it with ice cream, I've seen moms not do as well with that, but taking it with the Midwife's brew, there's some different recipes online. It's basically some juice, some nut butter, a little bit of tea, and the castor oil. I think that's everything. I just made it for a mom the other day. Blend it up in a smoothie and drink that. That is like typically the way that castor oil can be taken that is most like supportive to being able to be processed in your belly and not like stimulating you to want to throw up. So the Midwife's brew is what I recommend if you're considering taking castor oil. If you are wanting to do some other things and try without castor oil, that's what midwives often recommend. Like, try the spinning babies, try the pumping, try the mile circuit. And then if that doesn't work, like maybe the next day we'll do castor oil. We don't want to take it in the evening before you go to bed. So what you choose kind of depends on like the timing of things and how the urgency. If you're just like, I think I'd like to get things going and I feel maybe I'm 41 weeks in a few days and I just want to try to have my baby by 42 weeks, just maybe try the gentle things first. See if those work. If they don't, maybe the next day you can, after another good night's rest, try again with the castor oil, or take a day off and then try again with the castor oil. The risk to castor oil is that it can make your contractions more painful. They can also make contractions closer together. So castor oil contractions are typically contractions that are like 2 minutes apart or 3 minutes apart, so they're pretty close. And they can also be a little longer. On my first birth, which was a pain-free birth, I took 2 doses of castor oil. So I took 4 tablespoons. I have seen recipes that say start with 4 tablespoons online. Don't start with 4 tablespoons. Start with 1 or 2. Don't do 4. That's a lot. I was kind of alarmed when I saw that the other day. And I had a pain-free birth. Like, the contractions were close together, and maybe that was from the castor oil. With my third, my birth was very painful, and I did take castor oil. And what's so funny is that when I took the second dose, I took it from fear because I had this like fear come up, and I just like kind of went into myself, like I kind of isolated, and I was like, whatever, I'll just take it. It just wasn't the best choice. And I had this like low uterine cramp that like never went away the whole birth. And it was really, really uncomfortable. And I really feel like the difference was that I was in fear and I chose from fear, and it just wasn't the right choice for me. I didn't need that. I was already having contractions. I didn't need more castor oil, and I took it anyway. And that did make my labor more painful. So anyway, it doesn't mean your labor will be more painful, but it is a risk to be aware of. Definitely not compared to Pitocin. Pitocin can make your labor more painful for sure. And castor oil doesn't, it's not like that level of pain that Pitocin can sometimes cause, but that can happen. It can also lead to sometimes long ineffective contractions. So you're just having contractions like all day that aren't really leading anywhere. That usually happens if you take castor oil, but your baby isn't in a great position. So that's why we want to really emphasize position. The other risk, I've never seen this, and I have supported a lot of castor oil births, like so many, because I worked for a birth center. 200 people went through our birth center when I was working there for 2 years, and we give everyone castor oil. I mean, really, a lot of moms got castor oil, and I never saw this happen. So I don't know like how common it is, but in my understanding, it's rare. It can cause your baby to release some meconium, so they could poop in labor. Baby pooping when you're in labor does not always mean that's bad. Sometimes it can mean your baby is distressed. Other times, a little bit of meconium isn't that big of a deal, and it just depends on your provider's comfort around it and their knowledge around it. I know some providers that are comfortable with a little bit of meconium, and to a certain point they get concerned, but typically it does mean the baby's a little stressed out. So that is something to be aware of. But I've never seen it. And then the last one is, or is that it? Yeah, more painful, long contractions, and baby can poop. Actually, I think that's it. Those are all the risks. So that's castor oil. we do have some research that shows that your uterus increases in contractile activity when it's exposed to castor oil, which is really interesting. We used to think that it just stimulated the bowels and then that would make your uterus contract. But now we're seeing that maybe it actually does have a direct effect on the uterus. It is really effective. And I personally, like, I've had good experiences with it and also not so great, but I really have found that it's just about choosing from confidently, like from a place of love and not choosing from fear. And also, if you're already getting contractions, I think this was my problem. I took some even though I was already in early labor. If you're in early labor, you don't need any more, so don't take any more. Um, Typically, like in that formula, what you would do is like you do the spinning babies, you do the mile circuit, you have your breakfast, and then after that, you take the castor oil and no more than 2 tablespoons. And I also just want to like disclaimer, I'm not saying like to any herbs or castor oil, the things I'm going to talk about, I'm not saying 100% it's safe because like, I don't know how well researched it is. I'm just sharing like what I have seen and the general recommendations that I've seen and what I've done in my own personal experience. So you take the castor oil and then after that, you can start with pumping. And so actually, I would probably do the castor oil, and then after that, I would do a little rest, and then I would do pumping after that. So, trying to go into labor day, you want to alternate between movement and rest. So, if you just did a lot of movement, you took some castor oil, it might be a good time to just do a little bit of rest. And so, it's good to rest in exaggerated side lying position. That's part of the mouth circuit. So, you'll already have been in that position a little bit that morning. You could do the position then on the other side. It's recommended to start on your left side. The instructions are there in the mile circuit. You can just Google it and it'll be there. So you can just spend some time on your other side and do a little rest. And then after that, you can do some pumping. You could do pumping on for 10 or 15 minutes on one side or 10 or 15 minutes on the other, and you can alternate for a little bit for no more than an hour. And after that, we want to be done because we don't want to overstimulate your uterus with a lot of pumping. And I would just like get on my birth ball and hold the pumps and kind of like rock, or one at a time, and just kind of like rock back and forth on my birth ball, do a little pelvic tilts, like rocking forward and back, like the circles, some figure eights, bouncing up and down the ball isn't going to do anything, but like doing some like hip circles and things like that can. And I've watched The Office. Labor doesn't start very well under a microscope. So if you're like, you know, stressing about going into labor and you have like emotional blocks, like it's probably all the pumping in the world like isn't going to send you into labor. We want to feel relaxed and calm and safe. We want to have support for you if you need to process some things that can come up, because things can come up. And also we want to distract ourselves. So if you could have an early labor project when you're like, you're making cookies, you're doing couples Mad Lib together or something. I saw someone do that. I thought it was cute. You could just watch The Office, watch a sweet movie, do something to distract yourself kind of throughout this process. I think could be a really helpful thing to do. So we want to take some rest, do some pumping. And then so I just saw a regimen which said take another dose of castor oil after an hour. That from a midwife in my community. What I had my understanding was you want to take it every 4 hours, not to exceed 2 doses in 12 hours. So after 2 doses, you take a break and don't take any more. I think some people have said it's okay to do 3, but I personally, with my own baby, like I wouldn't do more than 2 doses of 2 tablespoons, and 4 hours apart is what I generally do. And unfortunately, there isn't any like, this is exactly how to do it. I'm just sharing like what I've seen this worked for me and what I have learned from the midwives in my community. So I probably recommend like waiting 4 hours so that you're not taking a lot more, because it can take a few hours for castor oil to start. So if you take some and you don't need any more, you don't want to take more than you need, right? So so you can do some pumping, and then after that we repeat and we just do it again. And now we're going to do another set of spinning babies and another mile circuit and another dose of castor oil, another rest, and then some more pumping, and then we repeat until we get to a certain point or maybe it's dinner time and maybe we didn't go into labor, in which case we have to be like, okay, we're going to be done doing the things and now we're just going to focus on rest. It's really important that you're feeling emotionally supported through this. If you get like your hopes up and you're like, today's the day I'm going into labor, and then you don't, it can feel like so disappointing. For a first-time mom, it can take using these tools sometimes a couple times. So you might have to do these things, wait a day, take a day off, and then do these things again. And also, if you don't go into labor, it's good to always just be assessing again and again and again. It felt like it was the right choice for me to try to get labor going today, but it isn't working. Do I want to just take a pause and like give spontaneous labor another chance? Maybe I do want to do that. Maybe I don't want to keep trying, and that's okay too. Like I said before, you don't have to routinely just try to get things going just because you're 40 weeks or 41 weeks or whatever. Your body knows how to go into spontaneous labor, and it will best do that when we're not stressing about going into labor and we're just trying to relax and distract ourselves a little bit right at the end of pregnancy and just do whatever brings you the most joy, and trying to like take it day by day. And there are valid reasons to try to go into labor and get things going at home, in which case, like by all means, do those things. But I just really want to be clear. I'm not telling anyone like make sure you like try to do these things, because there are risks, to forcing your body, or maybe not forcing. Medication kind of forces your body into labor. Natural tools, I don't think will really force your body into labor. They'll only really work if your body's kind of on the edge and ready for labor. But like I said, there are some risks to castor oil. There are some risks to mechanical tools. There really isn't that much harm in like doing any pumping, and the mile circuit and spinning babies are so great to do anyway, as long as you have a spotter when you do your curb walking, so you're not going to fall. And also you're making sure you're not exhausting yourself, right? So yeah, it's just about like combining those tools and doing what feels best for you. I will add, there's two more things I want to say, tools you can use before we close, and we're just right at our time. So one is acupuncture. If you are trying to get labor going, this mama who I supported the other day, she had that timeline. Oh, and a question. Yes, I'll totally check that in just a sec. She had a timeline around 36 hours, right? And that was at 7 p.m. And so we were like, okay, we have until 7 p.m. to try to get this mama into labor. And so what if like things don't work and we're kind of getting towards the evening? And we got in with an acupuncturist who could see her a little before that. And then the midwife also like offered a little flexibility around the timeline. So it gave her a little more time to see if the acupuncture could work. So we had a plan B. Acupuncture is a great tool. It's rarely like you put the needle in and you just go into labor, though that did happen to me, but typically it does take a day or two to like really kick in. But that is something you can do. Another one is body work. So if you could have someone who does craniosacral or perinatal body work, or a chiropractic, all of that work can sometimes help just fix an alignment issue, or a tension issue. If there's alignment or tension, misalignment or tension around the pelvis or the musculature, that can sometimes prevent baby getting into the position that they need to get in for labor to start. And so that's why it's great in pregnancy to just get in with an acupuncturist, get in with a massage therapist, or someone who might be able to see you if maybe you're 41 weeks and you're like, I need to have my baby by 42, or whatever, whatever the reason is. Like there's someone you can contact and see if they can get you in. And taking that holistic approach by we're looking at the positions, we're trying to encourage contractions, we're making sure that your needs are getting met with rest and things like that. We're also choosing from love, and we're well supported emotionally. We have our emotional support tools and our emotional support people, so that we're not like choosing from fear. All of that is really helpful. And I think that's a great approach for trying to get things going at home if you want to. So that's the formula. I'm going to post, where can I get to? There we go. I'm going to look at this question and answer it. And then I'm going to post a write-up of the formula with this training here in the next few days. If you need it sooner, DM me. And just want to be clear, I'm not saying like do these things, but it is something that I have seen that has helped, and you can pick and choose the things you want to do and don't want to do. The other thing that I do want to say that you could incorporate are herbs. Black cohosh and cotton root are herbs that midwives have used for generations to send moms into labor, but there is not any evidence on their safety. So you could incorporate them if you want to. What I have generally seen for both of them is to kind of halfway through this journey of the things that I was like telling you to do, right? With like the castor oil and the pumping. I think it's around the time you start doing the pumping, a little later in the day, you can take a dropper full of the tincture every half hour for no more than 6 hours. That's what's generally recommended, but there is no evidence of safety. So I can't say it's safe to do that. But the negative outcomes we have seen reported for moms doing that are for moms who take way too much or take it for way too long. So that's just like something to be aware of. Yeah. Okay. So let me read this. I have a question about pumping. I got a hand pump. How long would you recommend pumping for, and for each side? I guess I can collect the colostrum as I'm doing it. So yeah, number one, you don't have to collect colostrum if you don't want to. I don't really think that it's super necessary. Your baby will like know how to nurse most of the time. Every once in a while, rarely a baby can have low blood sugar, in which case you can give them a little bit of your pumped colostrum, but you could also just pump colostrum in the moment and give it to your baby. Sometimes taking colostrum you've pumped in frozen and putting it on the nipple can help give the baby help them figure out where to nurse. But generally that process unfolds, especially if you're having an unmedicated birth, really well. And even with an epidural, it unfolds really well too. Babies can just be a little bit more sleepy, in which case maybe pumping a little bit of colostrum or having some frozen could be helpful to put around your nipple to just give them a little bit of that like enticing invitation and that smell. But you don't have to collect it if you don't want to, but you can, you totally can. So I would pump for 15 minutes on each side. And then I would take a 10-minute break. And then I would pump it for 15 minutes again on each side and just do that twice, like 2 rounds. So it's only about an hour that you're doing that. And then take a little break. And you can do it again one more time, like later that day if you want to, when you repeat the whole cycle. We don't want to pump forever and ever because we don't want to overstimulate our uterus, because it does really cause your uterus to have contractions. And I have seen different recommendations for pumping. I think the mom who I supported recently, it was 2 hours. She was told to do it for, I think it was 10 minutes on each side, take a 10-minute break and do that for 2 hours straight. And so she did that. So I don't think there's any set rule, like don't do it for more than this amount of time or do it this much. I would just do 10 minutes on each side and do that a few times. Just try not to do it for more than, according to what I learned recently from the midwives in my community, 2 hours. I remember doing like stopping around an hour and then doing it later. So yeah, there isn't any set kind of like rule, but something like that feels good for you is good. So are there any more questions? You are welcome to unmute or drop a question in the chat. If not, then I will conclude. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. This was really fun to talk to you about getting things going at home. If you're interested in getting some personalized support and preparing for your birth, I offer free birth breakthrough sessions so we can kind of create a plan where I'll clarify for you. Alexis, you're welcome. The steps for you to feel really confident and prepared for birth, and we can explore how I can support you. Yeah, DM me if you have any questions at all about anything. And I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day, beautiful evening. Bye.